Welcome to episode 349 of the DFO Rundown, presented by Bet365. Download the app today, and you can use the promo code NATION to get on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. And if you like the big games, of course, college football, NFL, starting Thursday, there are 8 win or go home games in football. And then you got a host of NHL and NBA. There's lots to talk about. And get on the action at Bet365. I'm Jason Greger. Welcome in Frank Saravalli. And I'm saying January, like on the sporting calendar, my goodness, there is lots going on right now. But in the NHL, we've just passed the halfway point of the season. And you can look at pretenders, contenders. The West definitely has a much bigger separation. There's basically one playoff spot, I think, up for grabs. In the East, there's probably 2. I think Tampa Bay is a top 6 team, but the 2 wildcard spots, Frank, are wide open from like Boston, Columbus, Montreal, Pittsburgh still has a chance. The Flyers, heck, the Rangers still in the mix. It's almost who isn't in the mix in the East right now. I guess it would be Buffalo, and that's about it. The Red Wings are back in since Todd McClellan's being hired, so the East race looks good.
I'm not willing to even declare the Sabres dead yet.
Well, all right. It's very giving.
Is it? I mean, mathematically, you tell me who in that group is a world beater, and I'll say, okay, yeah, the Sabres are out.
Yeah. Well, it's not that they're a world beater. Just, I don't know. I guess in theory, sure. But I guess they go on a run. They can win 6 in a row.
You don't think so? The Blue Jackets, well, not by points percentage. The Sens are holding down the 8th and final spot. But you don't think the Sabres can make up 7 points?
I think it's
over the next
it's
3.5 months.
If it was 7 points in 2 teams, it just they got to make up 7 while everybody else is trying to make up 2 or 3.
I'm sorry, I don't buy the number of teams argument this season, because you have 2 good weeks and you float to the top. That's been the story of the whole. Why is it that we're talking about the Blue Jackets now? Because they're 6-3-1 in their last 10. Why is it that we were talking about the Montreal Canadiens being back in the mix? Because they had 2 good weeks and they're 8-2 in their last 10. Anyone that has 2 good weeks is in the mix. That's all it takes. So that's why I'm not willing to declare them dead yet.
Okay, well, I will. So we'll
see.
The teams, though, if you had to pick 2, because I'm putting out, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I have Tampa Bay in the top 6. The top 5 are obvious, but I put Tampa Bay in the top 6. Tampa Bay is actually quite good against playoff teams. And to me, that's a big factor when I look at records. They're good again. And Tampa's only played 14 games so far this year against non-playoff teams currently. So they have a much more favorable schedule down the stretch. Whereas Tampa's actually, to have 13 wins against playoff teams currently, they got the most. Like, that's a good record, man. 13-10-1. It's good.
But when we were talking about the show before, you said, oh yeah, I'm just going to talk about some playoff and non-playoff. This is schedule guy. You're still back in schedule guy mode.
Well, no, it's just are you telling me that if you had to face Edmonton, Vegas, Carolina, and Washington, or you faced Anaheim, San Jose, Chicago, who would you feel more comfortable in playing?
Of course. I'm just having fun with you, but it is still schedule guy.
Yeah. Well, quality of competition matters, right? And I think for me, I look at the team's records against playoff teams to show if are they a legit contender. And that's why I don't have Boston as a legit contender. They're 6-12-1 against playoff teams. They're like the worst record by far amongst the playoff teams. And I think I don't feel the Bruins are going to make the playoffs.
I'm definitely not willing to go there. I still think the Bruins make the playoffs. I think the Bruins are a team that has drastically underachieved for half of the first half. How about that?
Oh yeah. Like they're
I'm not saying they're a cup contender, but I think when you look at the rest of the muck that's in the Eastern Conference, how do you not think the Bruins are ahead of the rest of that group?
Well, you just look at their goal against differential. Like, they're getting murdered.
Okay. So they're also getting murdered when previously, statistically, they had one of the best goalies in the league. Jeremy Swayman's at 893. He's given up the most goals against in the entire league, 86. Is Jeremy Swayman really, for the last 40 games of the year, is he really going to play at an 893? His career save percentage prior to this in 133 games was 918.
Yeah. Well, the Bruins aren't, like, even last year, they weren't a great defensive team. And I think that's carried over into this year. So it's hard.
I don't think that's what's hampering the Bruins. They can't score.
Well, I agree with that.
They're 26th in the league in scoring.
Dude, I know that. But they give up a lot of chances.
You know who they miss?
Oh, Hampus Lindholm. Big time.
Jake DeBrusk.
Well, for a scoring factor, yeah. But they miss Lindholm on their back end.
Man, they could not wait to get rid of Jake DeBrusk, could they?
Yeah.
I mean, he's already got 17 goals. He's probably going to score a career high this year. He's on track for 34.
Oh, yeah. He can shoot, man.
I mean, he's as consistent as it got, pretty much.
Yeah, I felt he was underappreciated. In
27, 25, 27. Last year, a bit of a down year, 19.
Yeah.
It happens, but I don't know. Could have used a guy like him.
Oh, it's the old invisible gorilla theory. I think sometimes you see what you see and you don't want to see what you don't see.
The what?
And yeah, like it. So do you know what the invisible gorilla
is that
theory
a real thing? The invisible gorilla?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you'll have it. And so you get on the screen, there's a black and white thing, right? And it says, so count how many, and I can't remember exactly what it is. And then the question is they see, and they did this study at one of the Ivy League schools. And so you have the white and they're like, how many times you see the black and white? And then it says, how long was the black gorilla in the screen? And people are so focused on counting the white things coming up on the screen that they missed that a black gorilla came on the screen for, I don't know how long it was. And some people see it and some people don't. And it just shows you that when you get focused on something, you can miss lots of things. And I think in the case of Jake DeBrusk, and just like a lot of analysis on players, you focus on what you don't like and you miss all the things they do well. And Jake DeBrusk, as you just outlined, was a consistent scorer, maybe not super flashy. And he always seemed to be the guy I felt in Boston who, if he was the one who would get moved around and
he was the whipping boy.
It's not going. Yeah, a little bit, right? A little bit of it. So, and now they miss him. Now they also, let's be honest, Frank, they don't have great puck moving centers. And when you don't have that, it's really hard for wingers to score.
Well, it'd be nice if Elias Lindholm could skate again. I mean, what happened?
Dude, what did I say in that contract? That was the classic good player who's not elite gets a long-term contract, because those are the contracts that have killed NHL. We can go back to Kyle Okposo, Jeff Skinner, Milan Lucic. Go down the list of guys who were good players, not great skaters, and man, then they hit a stage, Frank, and it is like it hits hard, and it's a tough slog. Now, maybe it's his first year, and so he's in the muck, and he'll come back and be better, but I thought the minute that contract was signed, it was going to age poorly. And it's probably definitely in year one, it's been awful. Like, he has points in 15 of 43 Bruins games.
He can't move. He has slowed drastically.
Yeah.
And the Zadorov deal looks no better. It's just at a better AAV. I mean, I think that's the toughest part about diagnosing the Lindholm contract is you said it. A lot of people said it watching him last year, even as impactful as he was in the playoffs and played such an important role. I mean, we were talking during the season, how much did Elias Lindholm lose on his contract from what the Flames were offering? I know dead certain that they offered at least 8 times 8. I'm pretty sure they were willing to go 8 times 8.5 is $68 million.
Yeah.
The fact that he lucked out with what he did in Boston. It's unbelievable that he still ended up getting $54.25 million at 7 times 7.5.
Hey man, Flame fans, some of the best deals you make are the ones you don't make.
I thought that contract would be way closer to 7 times 6 million.
Yeah.
At which point he would have been costing himself a ton, $25 million bucks at least.
Well,
it's amazing that he was able to, like, honestly, that's a good agent right there.
Well, now speaking of the Bruins, Frank, having just watched them, there's one player on their team who's probably better as a winger, but he's playing center because they moved Charlie Cole to the second line wing to try to get him going, and it's worked a little bit. But Trent Frederick is a pending UFA and comes in at a pretty good cap hit. He's also on the most recent your most recent trade targets that came out. And I look at Frederick and I could see him being a very enticing piece for teams because there's just not many guys in the league who bring, he's got a decent scoring touch, but a physicality and a presence that guys don't have.
He's a pain in the ass to play against.
Oh, yeah.
And
take him on my team all day.
Yeah, he mixes it up. He's got a little bit of Brad Marchand in him, a little bit of Sam Bennett in him. I think he'd be I think he's one of those guys when he gets to playoff time, his value goes up way higher than his production and his cap hit. Here's the other thing about the Bruins. Like they draw a pretty hard line with these guys. And if you look over the last 10 to 15 years, I don't think there's been a better team in the NHL that has developed guys that come into the league as fourth liners that know exactly what their role is and they execute to a T. They become a little bit more valuable. They keep them for a small bit of time, and then they cut them loose when they get too expensive because they say, look, we can just bring in the next guys from Providence or wherever else and train them and mine them and do the same thing. I think it is like a staple of the Boston Bruins that they do it so well.
Well, for the last 25 years, no one has more wins in the NHL than the Boston Bruins. So they've had a really good run. Don't get me wrong. Their team right now, like eventually everybody falls off the mountain. It's just the evolution of sports. It's hard, but for 25 years, no one's had more wins in the NHL. And even since they won their last cup in 2011, they have the most wins. So it's not like they're hanging on to something years ago. They're still one of the best teams consistently in the regular season. Right. And
what would you do if you're Cam Neely? We know he's an impatient guy. We know he can be emotional and reactive. You hear the chants of Fire Sweeney echoing through the Garden. What would be the first thing you'd be asking your GM today?
Well, I think they have to look and they have to find a way to get a center iceman. Harder, way harder than it is to just say for me. It's captain obvious, but until they get a center, Frank, I just don't think they can, like a top center. Hard.
So who are you going after? Elias Pettersson?
Well, he would be. I would be calling for sure. That's like he's the only name out there, like him and JT Miller. I don't care, one of the two. If Vancouver is seriously considering it, then I think Boston, they're the team. And let's be honest.
So if let's say you're Vancouver though, and you look at Boston's let's play matchmaker.
Oh, defense.
What would you want off of Boston's roster?
Well, they want to improve their defense, right? So I'd be looking at. I like Brandon Carlo. I love his cap hit too. So he would be one guy right off the top. Like you're not going to get Charlie McAvoy. Obviously, you'd want him. I'd even if you want to make a trade for something, you got to give up something. And you know what?
So what is it?
Hampus Lindholm.
I'd say Brandon Carlo gets you 10% of the way there.
Yeah. What about Hampus Lindholm then? Like if you're making it like Pettersson and Miller are legit guys here. So if you want to get them, you got to give up something legit. And Hampus Lindholm's legit.
Legit as what?
Oh, I think he's a really good. He's a top pair defenseman. He's not a number one. I think he's a really good number two. And I know, Vancouver needs help on their back end.
Okay, so you're giving up a number one center.
Yeah, but that's just a starting point.
100-point player. Okay, so let's say Hampus Lindholm. Let's say they're willing to do it, and that gets you 25% of the way there. What else? I'm really what I'm saying is I'm having a hard time if I'm Vancouver, picking enough to feel like I'm getting equal value for what I'm giving up.
Well, but everybody, usually when you trade the best player, Frank, the harsh reality is rarely is it like, we don't have the Hossa for Heatley trades very often in the NHL. We just don't, right? So if you're trading a guy like this, like Vancouver, the odds of them getting a package back where you say, hey, this is even or we won, I think is really low, just based on history of trades like that.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So put together the package for me. So you go Lindholm and then what?
I would go Lindholm. Who am I? Boston. Oh, hey.
And not for nothing, you're getting a 30-year-old guy who signed long-term. Just so, I think we should factor that in. He's got 5 years remaining after this.
Yeah, which is kind of, I think, what I want, because the guys you're trading have long-term deals. Like 6 points for a top pair defenseman is not an outrageous number.
Okay.
Right? So then you're looking at guys who you'd like that, salary cap matters, right? So, and that's the other thing. Is it Pettersson or is it Miller? Because, there's a $3 million difference in what you're giving out and what you're bringing in. So if I look up and down their lineup, like other guys, then you can take one of, probably Pavel Zacha. I think he's a good player, right? He's Boston's going to want to, going to have free up some money down the middle. And, I'd probably take, if I'm Vancouver, I'd rather have Zacha over Coyle because he's a lower cap hit and I think he's a better player.
Okay.
So Zacha, Lindholm, and a pick. I'm not sure you're getting much more than that. It's not like Elias Pettersson right now is killing it, right? Like he's also at a time like that when they're making this trade. Now, JT Miller just had a great game, 4-point game. So maybe he gets going here, but like Elias Pettersson is not playing like a 100-point guy. And you and I both know, Frank, that teams out there are going to grind you when you want to quote help your opposing GM when he wants to trade a guy who's not playing at the best.
It's not enough for me. So like, let's say you're getting, let's even say Lindholm, Zacha, and a first.
Yeah. Like, do you think you can get more than that realistically?
I'm not saying you can. I'm just saying it doesn't. I don't think it. I just made my team better.
Okay. So for either one of now that package, would that be for Pettersson or Miller?
For Pettersson.
Because Pettersson, you think probably commands you more because he's younger.
Number one. I think there's way more value in Pettersson.
So would you do it then for JT Miller? And would Boston do it for Miller? Like, I think JT Miller would be like
the bigger question is, would Miller do it? Because he holds all the cards. And
well,
that's one thing really lost in this.
Yeah, but Boston's a pretty attractive market historically, right? Like it's a great city, number one. We just outlined, like they've been a really competitive team for a long time. You're JT Miller, you go there. Well, guess who gets to be your winger? David Pastrnak. There's not a lot of teams around the league that can go to JT Miller and say, you come to our team, this is the winger you're playing. Like, which wingers are better than Pastrnak for a team? Colorado's not going to go after those guys. Edmonton's not going after those. Like, who's the team that's got a winger that's close to Pastrnak? Not many.
Not many. Yeah, you're right.
Pretty attractive. Like, that's a pretty attractive landing spot for a center iceman who wants to be able to produce and play with a good player.
I walked us through this exercise because everyone wants to dream in Technicolor these last few weeks. Oh, Miller or Pettersson, one of them's going. It's way harder to do than you imagine.
That's why I just said if Vancouver, because I'm not saying Vancouver should do it. To me, I would try to figure out a way to keep both those players because
I agree.
I think the chances of you winning the trade are low.
Right. So then let's say, okay, let's just again play hypothetical. They've made the decision today that one of these guys has to go and they have to do it. Would you do it in season? Like,
I guess it all depends which pack.
Deal with Boston that may or may not work with you. And again, a hypothetical, or you could wait until the summer when, hey, maybe I don't know, pick another team that's in the playoff mix right now that isn't willing to cut pieces off of their roster. That might be a better trade fit for you.
Possibly. It all depends on what package do I get offered in season. That would be, I would look at, because then I could go and look at other teams and say, okay, if we play the what if game, what other teams could make a deal and which pieces would we want, and would they be willing to do it? And if that package isn't better than the one we're getting, then take the one you're getting. Because what if you turn down the trade, then you go to the summer and maybe that team makes another move and now that trade's off the table and none of the other trades in the summer are any better. So to me, it all depends on, can I make if whatever is the time to make the best deal that I get like the actual best deal offered for me. Because I think you and I both know, Frank, there'll be GMs that talk to them and you get close to it. I've talked to many GMs. There's been lots of times you've gone down the conversation path. Okay, you want this and this. We're we willing to give you this and this. And one team's like, no, I'm not doing it. But you get a good sense of what you're going to get from certain teams, right? Like the ones that are serious. I'd be like, don't kick tires. Don't waste my time.
Right.
Give me your
Which
package.
is why they've engaged in these conversations and why the story hasn't gone away.
So to me, it's fascinating. Now, a lot of the guys on the trade targets board aren't necessarily ones. Lots of them are penning UFAs. And now there's a few guys, Dylan Cozens, you have a number 5 on your list. He's got 5 years left and he's having a tough go right now in Buffalo, really young player. But I want to talk about your top 5. Brock Nelson.
Can I ask you one question about Cozens?
Yeah.
What is Dylan Cozens? Is he the 31 goal, 68 point guy? Or over these last 2 seasons now, so a season and a half, he has fewer points in this last season and a half than he did 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Which one is he?
It's a great question. I think Dylan Cozens is probably would come in right now if you're projecting, say, okay, over the next 5 years of his deal, if he could be a 50 to 55 point player, that's probably who he is, right? Like I kind of cut the difference between the last 2 years because then he averages right around 58. That's high. He's now this year in Buffalo, lots has gone wrong for lots of different guys. And
oh man, what a fence sitting answer though.
No, but that's what I think he is. I think he's a 50 right now. I'd say he's a 55 point player.
So his contract probably makes him slightly overpaid. Not slightly, probably decently overpaid.
A little bit, $1 million. Yeah.
So if that's the case and he's 23, if you're Kevin Adams, do you hang on to him longer and see if he reverts back, or do you move him now while the value is still high before he's found out?
Like, I don't think Buffalo can afford.
Because we're asking the question, there's enough mystery around the league as to, hey, maybe he is the upper tier, upper echelon player that he showed to be at age 21. That's in there somewhere. Can we get it out of him again? Versus if he goes and does this, finishes off this season, and then into next year at the same paces again, the value is going to plummet.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of it, a guy like Cozens, because and this isn't a knock because there's only a handful of, I think, true drivers in the NHL. So he's not a driver. So whichever team takes him, or when you're projecting, you're like, okay, well, who's he going to play with? I think that's a factor that sometimes gets overlooked, right? Guys go to a different situation that's just better for them. It's a better fit. They got a winger or a center iceman that complements their game better. And that helps for certain guys. I don't think there's any question about that. So I got to look up who Dylan Cozens in that who was he playing with mainly that season, when he had his career year, right? And, has that remained the same? Has
Tage Thompson, given the goals that were scored?
Yeah. Well, and Tage Thompson obviously had he had the one unreal year where he scored 47 too, right?
Yeah. I mean, a huge chunk of that had to be playing in his orbit, I would think.
Yeah. Well, I'll look it up right now as we're speaking, but give me your thoughts while I look that up on Brock Nelson. He is, he's been an Islander forever. He's a really consistent player.
Not this year.
Yeah, no, not this year. But who do you think is a fit for Brock Nelson, and which teams do you think are interested?
I think the clear fit is the Minnesota Wild.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, put together the pieces, okay? Warroad, Minnesota native. Bill Guerin, GM of Team USA 4 Nations, picks Brock Nelson having down year. Like, that's not a guy that played his way onto the team. That's a guy that was just on the team. And he picks him for Four Nations face-off, and you can just see the dots connecting. Minnesota needs a center desperately. Seems like a pretty good fit.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Bill
I
Guerin
don't
and
mind
Lou
that.
Lamoriello have a history. You can do a deal.
Yeah. No, that's fair. So
I'm not saying it's that's the only team. Look how thin the center market is.
Oh, yes.
There's a reason why he's number one on the board. He's the premier rental center available this year. So you're going to have 5-7 teams that are interested.
So the year that Dylan Cozens had his great year, he played mainly with JJ Peterka and Jack Quinn. He played a total of 63 minutes, 5-on-5 with Tage Thompson. But
so that's like 63 minutes is like 4
nothing.
to 5 full games worth of
Yeah.
even strength.
Yeah, so not much at all, right? When you look at
Maybe 6.
maybe 6. Dylan Cozens, though, that year, he had 39
But
points.
that's the year that Jack Quinn had a great year. Another guy who's been a healthy scratch. Jack Quinn was even younger that year.
Yeah.
And he had what, 30? Did he have 31 or 38 points and 14 goals?
Yeah. Well, the big thing for Dylan Cozens is his 5-on-5 production this year. He's on pace for 34 points, 5-on-5. He had 39 the year he scored 68 points. The difference was his power play points, right? That's when you break
game with Tage Thompson on the unit.
Yeah, when you break down Dylan Cozens that year, like the biggest, it's not his 5-on-5 play that's dropped off, it's his power play production.
Okay, but so Cozens' production as a whole has dropped off. Jack Quinn's as a whole has dropped off. He had 14 goals and 37 points that year. And Peterka's the only one who's held up his end of the bargain. So it makes an even more fascinating question, which is it really these guys or is something else happening around them? How come they can do it 2 years ago and do it together, and now the same group is just 1 year in which everything goes right?
Hey, dude, it's the
It
biggest
can't
challenge in
be,
the
can
NHL.
it?
Yeah, well, consistency. That's the hardest thing anybody will tell you in the NHL, right? So, and sometimes, Joe, you're a young player, you have a great year, and I don't know if you naturally just think, okay, this is now the bar and this is what I'm going to do. And then the next year it doesn't come as easy. And now you're frustrated. And now the next year it compounds. And I think there's a lot of factors. Like I think Buffalo came in and they really felt they were going to at least compete for a playoff spot this year, right? Now, whether they make it or not, but at least, you're in the mix and you're right there. And they go over, they start in Europe, they lose 2 straight.
How insanely low is the bar though? Like, think about this year that we're talking about, the year in which Cozens, Thompson, Quinn, all these guys have great years. They finished 1 point out of the playoffs 2 seasons ago. Last year, the expectation wasn't to compete for a playoff spot. It was to be in a playoff spot. And they finished 10 back, 8 back. They went from 1 point back to 8 points back. Now this year, it might be even worse. Now what?
Well, remember the year, though, that they almost made the playoffs? They were like the 3rd highest scoring team in the league. Like they had the perfect storm of all these guys having great years. And that's just not, it's like Seattle. Remember when Seattle made the playoffs?
Yeah, I was just going to say they had the Kraken experience.
Yeah. Like everybody produced. Their 4th line had like 40 goals or 50 goals, for God's sakes. They all had, I think, close to 14 goals. It was unreal. And then they got rid of their whole 4th line, funny enough. And then they, all of a sudden they're like, geez, we can't score. So,
you know what's funny? No one's really having that type of year this year. And I think if you were going to say that anyone had it last year, it would be the Canucks. Just about everything that could go right for the Canucks last year did.
Yeah. Yeah. When you have
9-point team.
When you have too many guys, it sounds odd. When you have too many guys have career years, the next year is virtually impossible that you're going to match it. It's too hard. You're always going to have some guys have career years. That's just how it is. And, but if you have everybody or the majority of them, then you have a problem.
Because
it's just hard to repeat that.
You know who's got a little bit of that this year is the Caps. They've got a shred of that.
Oh,
Dylan
yeah. Well,
Strome,
Ovi's having the best start, like second best start of his life.
but what about Dylan Strome? He was on track for 100+ points as of a couple weeks ago. And you look at McMichael and Protas and all these guys way out of the ceiling of what they were previously near.
Yeah. Well,
and
it's
now,
great for this year, right? But
but now the Caps are they've come back to earth here in the last little bit. And if you listen to Spencer Carberry, he has voiced his frustration on multiple nights now of why it's taking this team so long to get back in gear.
Yeah. Well, they did get a big win last night against the Canucks, but yeah, you're right. I also think in Washington now, Carberry's raised their expectation level. That's a good thing, right? Like, you know, sometimes as a coach, you can be a little bit harder when your team's winning because they're confident and now you know, okay, I can challenge them and they'll accept it. Whereas if you're losing, you're in the muck, you know, you got to play cheerleader almost to try to, you can't hammer on some guys because they're already lacking in confidence. So it doesn't surprise me. It's probably smart. That's why Carberry, to me, he's a great young coach. I really like him. And I think it's very wise because, you know what, when Ovi went down, obviously their 5-on-5 scoring struggled, right? So that was a sign. But defensively, they're still pretty good. And I still think that's their calling card. That was kind of their calling card last year.
He said yesterday, and I thought it was a fascinating quote. He said, "We have to be careful with resting on what we accomplished at the beginning of the year." He said, "I'm starting to get a little impatient. I'll say that with the way things have gone of late because now it's creeping into where you have some ups and downs in a year and guys go through slumps. Your team goes through slumps. This is now turning into more. The challenge for us as a group is our start is long gone now. And now you are who you are. You are what you show on the ice." Did we just get off to a good start with a great shooting percentage and win a lot of games and bank a bunch of points? Or are we a team that can carry play and look really good 7 out of 10 nights? And that's what we're going through right now and what our challenge is before the Four Nations break. I think such a fascinating quote and such an interesting way to look and think about it.
And you know what? In their last month, Frank, they're 8-4-2, which is the, they got the sixth most points in the NHL. And they have the ninth best points percentage. So they've dropped a bit, but
the Canucks prior to the Canucks game, they were 5-4-2. So
yeah,
it's a little bit of a different look depending on how, again, if you go back to the last month, that might be the first part of what he's talking about is are we a team that just got off to a really good start?
So speaking of the Caps, when you look at your trade target board, do you see a fit for them?
I really have to think about what exactly it is that the Caps need. When I look at this group, like I don't see a glaring weakness. Maybe they could use a little bit of help on the left side of their defense. But Chychrun has been great offensively. I don't know that you want to box out someone like Miroshnichenko up front and bring in people on your third line. They're really well situated down the middle, and the LA Kings heads have to be exploding watching Pierre-Luc Dubois' work rate this year compared to last. Like, watch last night's game. He looks like a totally different player.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I was on Team Dubois at the start of the year and said that
you weren't, but look, when you go from team to team to team, Jets, Blue Jackets, Kings, they sign you to a massive deal and you that's the way you repay them in year one. Like, I'm sorry, I'm picking the field. I'm not picking the one singular thing.
Well, the thing was in Winnipeg, he just said he wasn't going to re-sign there, and that's fair. It's his right. LA, you look at, they signed him. I don't think LA did them any favors. You look at his 5-on-5 production was pretty close, but he didn't get a sniff on the power play. If you sign an offensive player and you want him to produce, and then you don't put him on the power play,
you got to earn a spot on the power play, bud. He couldn't compete. But he wouldn't compete for a slice of pizza last year.
Yeah.
What are you just going to hand him? You just gave him $64 million. Why are you going to hand him power play time?
Yeah. I'll say this though, going back to the Caps, the one guy I watch for, Frank, in Washington, who I just look at, at usage of a player and salary cap and everything else, I won't be surprised if the Caps make a move and it has Mangiapane going out.
Okay.
And because I look at it two,
like, I'm not being facetious, but who would want Mangiapane?
Well, but I look at Mangiapane in two ways, Frank. So he's in the final year of his deal. You know, it hasn't gone as well as he would have liked. And so, you know what?
You don't think they're happy with him this season?
Well, his production per minute's actually not bad, but
he's on pace to double like his goal total from 2 seasons ago. This is what Andrew Mangiapane is. He's a 17, 18 goal scorer. Look at his numbers, 17, 18, 17. There's 1 year sandwiched in between that was 35.
Yeah.
He is what he is.
But he's playing on their fourth line a lot as a $5.8 million player.
Well, I didn't understand that trade when they made it, but that's just me.
Yeah. So I just think
I thought the Flames got incredible value for Mangiapane in the summer to move off of that deal to get a second-round pick back. The Caps aren't getting close to a second-round pick for Mangiapane now.
No, I could see it being a move that clears up some cap space. And I could see Mangiapane being like, you know what? I get moved somewhere else, because in the final 6 weeks of the year, as you mentioned, like his goal production for the minute he's played is actually higher than other years, right? Like his on ice production is actually better because he's not playing as many minutes as he has.
The Caps have cap space.
Yeah.
So they don't need to do that. If you're getting, whether his cap hit is 1 or 7, if you're getting decent,
the Caps are in LTIR, are they not? With Backstrom?
Yeah, but they have space. They have more room in the LTIR world to add.
Yeah,
in their pool.
Yes, you could add there, but I look at fit and everything else. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a move that sees him move out, and you go to a team that's out of the playoffs most likely, and Mangiapane says, "Hey, I got 2 months here, or not 2 months, depending on when he goes, 6 weeks to just kind of send a message to the teams around the league as I head into free agency." That
I don't see that at all. I think he has the same motivation to make the same message or send the same message and do it in Washington and do it on a playoff team.
But the coach, I look at fit, right? That he's not. There's a reason
that
why
the object of a coach is to get the most in the most out of the least time.
I guess so. You can make that argument, but I just wonder you know how it is with players, Frank. If all of a sudden you're playing 3-4 minutes less a night all the time, like, you're not going to be happy.
Here's the big thing that I think from a Caps perspective is a fair question to ask. Given what we just said about this team kind of being on a heater to start and a lot of things going right and players having career years, this is a team that really not very long ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, was mired in a rebuild and not really going anywhere fast. So they've had some career years. They've got some really good prospects coming.
They made some good moves, man.
They really did. Is this a year that you just sit tight and hope that what you've built has, like, I'd have to think that if I'm Chris Patrick, first year GM, and obviously he has the counsel of Brian McClellan as president of hockey ops, I'm looking at this saying, we have a chance, but it's a small one. And I'm not sure that I'd put the Caps in with the big dogs yet in the East, just to get out of the East.
Who are the big dogs in the East? Like, honestly, is New Jersey that much of a big dog compared to Washington?
Would the Caps be favored in any playoff series they play in the Metro bracket?
Yeah.
Who?
Well, they're number one, so they're going to take who's ever the wild card. So in the first round, they're going to be the favorite for sure.
I'm saying in their bracket. So like let's say
honestly,
further highlights to me the need to win the division.
Yeah, for sure. Because then you only have to face one of New Jersey and Carolina in the second round.
Okay, but either against New Jersey or Carolina, they're probably not going to be the favorite.
Ooh, I don't know, man. I'm not sold that New Jersey's like New Jersey's behind the standings because they played more games than everyone all year long. And you've pointed it out. Their points percentage, like, they're good. I don't think New Jersey's like great.
I think they've defended vastly better than they ever have. And I think their team is structured in such a more complete way to compete for the playoffs, in the playoffs. And I also think New Jersey's going to be aggressive because their championship window is just starting to open. I think New Jersey's going to be really good for the next 5 to 8 years. Okay. So, but what are the Caps though? They still have some older pieces, Carlson, Ovechkin, and guys that you want to do right by. But are the Caps truly in a window to win yet? Would you be, for a team that is really just on the other side of making a lot of really smart moves and rebuilding, are you giving up future assets to pump up this team this year? I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying it's a fair, holistic question to ask.
Well, when I look at the Caps top 6, the only guy who's old is Ovechkin. Dubois, McMichael, Protas. McMichael and Protas are young. Dylan Strome's just kind of in that, him and Dubois are not old at all. They're good veterans. And Tom Wilson's a heck of a player. I like him a lot. So I like Washington better than you, I think, for sure.
It's not that I don't like them. I'm just saying, are they a favorite do they have a real authentic chance to get to a cup final?
I don't love them against the top 2 teams in the Atlantic. For sure, but I wouldn't be.
So if we're not sure if they're going to be a favorite against the Carolina Hurricanes or the New Jersey,
I'd have them a favorite against the Devils for sure.
Okay, I think that's
and even you know what? I might even say Carolina, Frank, because tell me who's Carolina's goalie when the playoffs start. You can't, because no one knows who's healthy there.
Well, yeah, Freddie Anderson working his way back from the knee injury, back on the ice, and different than what Freddie Anderson was dealing with before, but fair point and valid nonetheless.
Yeah.
And we also don't know, the Hurricanes are going to have a true buyer's market when it comes to the goalie market in March. So I'd be careful about making that judgment right now.
So you think they might add a goalie?
Oh, I think they're going to add a goalie. I think they're going to wait to find whoever the cheapest value piece that they can. Yes, I would bet a significant sum of money that the Carolina Hurricanes trade for a goalie.
So they're going to be like, it's insanity to go in the playoffs again with this goalie.
No, I think that's what I don't know if they're thinking it's insanity, but I think they're thinking we should probably insure ourselves, and they're just not going to spend a lot to do it. So whether it's Vladar or someone else around,
but that's the Anaheim Ducks. So you're saying they're going to get
asking a high price for John Gibson. They're out of their tree.
Yeah, but you're saying, but if they have Anderson and Kochetkov, so are they adding like a depth goalie, or are they adding a guy they think is going to start?
It's probably just another guy that's in the same realm as they don't. That's not how they view goaltending as an organization.
Okay.
So again, we acknowledge. Let's say Caps win the division. They get one of the wild card teams, probably in a really good spot to win a series. Then they get to round 2, and at the very best, you're saying not a favorite, but it's probably a toss-up.
I might have them as a favorite against both teams. I like the Caps.
Okay, so let's say so then you've acknowledged though that third round you don't like them against whoever comes out of the Atlantic.
Yeah, they would be the underdog there for me.
And then what about the Cup final?
Oh yeah.
If we're ballparking percentage chance that the Washington Capitals win the Stanley Cup this season.
Oh, low, of course. But you could say that against most teams. But I like the Caps.
So
how big of a swing?
This brings me back to my original question, which is, what is your deadline posture? What is it that you're trying to, how much are you willing to spend?
Well, I think, Frank, I wouldn't be shocked because of sometimes everything's going right. You got to go for it. Now, I don't know if they're going to give up tons of first rounders. We'll see. They've got a lot of good young prospects. That's their advantage, right? Like they were an older team for a while. Now they're kind of a mid-tier team that got some of their better players are younger, and they got a really good prospect pool. So they could give up a first and not really worry about it because that first probably isn't helping you for 5 years anyway.
Well, and this draft is one that I think you want to give up your first in.
Yeah. So
if it's super late, if it's in the 20s, I think this is a prime year to probably do it.
Yeah.
So if depending on which model you look at, the Caps have a pretty healthy percent chance to win the Cup.
Yeah, I bet. Probably what, like 18?
No, it's 8.6.
8.6. Okay. So that's Who's the highest?
It is the Oilers at 15.4.
15. Okay. Yeah.
But this would have them as underdogs against the Devils in round 2.
Okay. See, I just like Washington. Washington's got some skilled size. Overall, their skilled size is bigger and better than the skilled size. Like the Devils have good skill, but they got a smaller group. And that's in a 7-game series, man. Oof, we all know that can be a difference.
I think it's a really interesting philosophical question to ask if you're the Caps. Should we just leave it as is and keep our powder dry? Because of the things you just mentioned, if you can wait another year or two before really going all in, some of those other teams are going to fade away between now and then.
That's valid. Now, I don't know if they're like, I don't think they're going to go like all their chips in, but maybe 15, 20% of their pile.
Let's see what this next 20 games looks like, because I'm really intrigued by what Carberry said. Because if you read that, he's kind of sounding the alarm saying, what are we?
Yeah. Smart.
Are we actually really good?
Yeah, good timing. Good way to challenge your team. Let's bring in Ty Yaremchuk. Ty, how you doing?
I'm doing good, boys. Ready to go with a new edition of Buy or Sell, brought to you by our friends over at Bet365. Got a handful of questions for you guys, some of them deadline related. Let's actually start with the one non-deadline related one, though. We are almost at the halfway point of the season. A handful of teams have hit that mark so far, but there are 11 players currently on pace for 100 points. Braden Point is like right there because he's missed a couple of games with injuries, but I'm including him in this conversation. So here are the players you got that are currently on pace: McKinnon, Kucherov, McDavid, Draisaitl, Kaprizov, Rantanen, Marner, Point, Eichel, and Kyle Connor. Sorry, that is only 10 names. But out of those 10, buy or sell, do you think all 10 will make it to 100 points, or do you think someone misses, Greg's?
Oh, yeah, I'll sell all day. It's halfway through the season. Somebody's going to miss a few games, injuries here or there. I'll say, honestly, 7 make it.
All right, buying on 7. Frank?
So who do you have out? Marner and Eichel would be the first 2 career 100-point players.
Yeah, I have Connor too, right? He hasn't scored 100, has he?
Sorry, 1, 2, 3. There's 4.
Yeah. I would say Connor and Eichel would be the first 2, and then just because games played might be a factor here, so it's the only reason, because Kaprizov's been unreal when he's played. He's almost like 1.5 points a game. So if he stays healthy,
he's hurt, and that's the thing.
That's what I'm going to say. I'll say those 3: Connor, Eichel, and Kaprizov.
Yeah, I hate to agree with you, but that's probably what I'd be looking at too. I'm curious about Point, though, because there's not much margin for error. Connor's on track for 103, Point's on track for 105. You're talking about a bad 3-game stretch, and you don't hit it.
Yeah. I will say this. I think Marner's going to get 100 for the first time in his career. It's almost a lock unless he gets hurt.
I mean, he did get to 99 before, so
it's right
not
there.
really that big of a stretch.
So there's a couple of guys who are kind of on just the outside looking in. Makar is right there in terms of his pace. You need to be at like 1.21 points per game and play all 82. Makar's at 1.17. Natchez is at 1.15. Scheifele's even at 1.14, Panarin 1.13. Like, there's a few guys right in the mix, is my point. If I set the line, not just those specific players, but if I just said, hey, 9.5 guys are going to get there this year, would you take the over or the under, Frank?
Under.
Under?
Yeah.
Greg's?
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. Last year we had exactly 9, with Nylander sitting at 98, Kaprizov at 96. So I feel like 9.5 is like a pretty good line based on how things are going so far this season.
The one number to watch for, Cale Makar could be one of the few defensemen ever, and Hughes, to go back-to-back 90-point seasons.
Well, Werenski's on track for more than 92.
Yeah, but he's never. I just said back-to-back.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard.
How many could we have? 3 90-point defensemen in 1 year?
Zach Werenski, Norris Trophy. Hi-yo.
I was playing buy or sell Zach Werenski, actual Norris Trophy candidate. That was my next one.
How could he not be?
Yeah,
buy that all day long.
Winner, I'm not sure yet.
Finalist, would you have him in your top 3 right now?
Yes.
Oh God, yeah.
Makar, Werenski.
I don't think it's close. Werenski's been unreal for that team.
Yeah, leading them in.
What are the odds for Werenski to win the Norris?
Last time I checked, he was at 9-1 to win the Norris. I'm not sure how much those have changed in the last couple of days, but I can pull it up here really quick. Celebrini running away with the call.
Is that who you'd vote for, Jay?
At the halfway point, I crunched all the numbers. I would vote for Werenski.
So right now, Cale Makar is still kind of running away with this thing, minus 300. And then it's Hughes at plus 300, Werenski at plus 550 on Bet365.
Yeah. Like I look at Werenski's, his production, but his minutes played, his goals again, and it kills penalties. That's the one thing that I think, it's the Norris. It's not just about points, it's about everything. His defensive game has been really good too.
Mm-hmm. You can get, actually, they're offering Cale Makar versus the field, and the field is plus 225, which actually doesn't seem like that terrible.
I would take 225.
Yeah. To get basically both Hughes and Werenski.
Yes.
Tempting.
Oh yeah.
And what's the guarantee that Makar even stays healthy?
That's what I'm saying. Like, they have another one too, like the Vezina.
You're voting. You're betting on Hughes, Werenski, or Makar's health.
Yeah.
Any one of those three things gets the job done.
They also
I can't bet on NHL awards.
Yeah. The Vezina, they have the field versus Hellebuck, and it's such a runaway that the field is 7-1 right now in the Vezina race. But I still don't think I'd touch it.
Okay, hey, I got a great question for you guys right now. So Connor Hellebuck, only 4 goalies in NHL history have led the league in wins, save percentage, goals against average, and shutouts. Only 4. Frank, there's one that I don't think anybody would guess that's connected to your city. Do you know who it is?
Pelle Lindbergh?
No. Bob Rose, 1986. You had Bernie Perron in 74, Ken Dryden in 73, and Jacques Plante in 59. Like, wow. The Hellebuck season right now, he's first in all those categories. He's second in save percentage by 1. He's 926. Stolarz is 927. And Stolarz, obviously, you know what? He's going to have to get back and play to qualify to have enough games played. Hellebuck's having an unreal year. Like, it's going to be hard for anybody to dethrone him.
The pastor.
All right, a couple more quick ones for you.
He became a pastor after playing goal.
Bob did.
Yes.
Couple quick ones for you guys, both based on the New York teams who are all over Frank's trade targets board. Let's start with the Rangers. Frank has 4 defensemen from the Rangers on his trade targets board. I'm going to set the line at 1.5, over under 1.5 defensemen traded from the Rangers before the deadline, Frank.
I'll take the over because I'm not gonna cheat, but I'm gonna include Zach Jones. He's on the list, so that counts. But they got to find a way to move Zach Jones.
So Zach Jones and one of the vets will go.
Yep.
Greg's.
See, I can't rule the Rangers out of the playoff race yet because you
can't rule anyone out.
Yeah, but that's like, it's interesting because you look like. They just got Will Borgen. I guess you could get rid of him. He's a Penn UFA. Ryan Lindgren.
If you're out.
I'm going to go under because I think the Rangers, they got too much skill not to find their way in. And now Drury, I don't know. Like, I think he annoyed his group enough when he even put guys' names out there and then moved some. If all of a sudden they're a point out of the playoff race on March 7th, is he going to suddenly trade away more guys? So I'm going to go under.
All right, quickly to wrap up, you also have 3 Islanders on your list. It is Nelson, Palmieri, and JG Pajot. I'll set the line at 1.5. Greg's 1.5. Forwards from the Islanders gone before deadline.
Oh, God, yeah, I'll go over all day long. They got to change that team, man. Like, it's being the same old forever. So, yeah, I'll go over for sure.
Frank, quickly?
Yeah, I'd like to say over, but the Islanders truly are in the category of only God and Lou know, because every time we'd expect this team to punt and do something different, they've done the same exact thing. So I'm going to take the under just for fun.
All right, there you go, boys. That's a wrap on this week's edition of Buy or Sell or Over Under. I don't know. It morphed into a weird thing this week.
So kind of both. Nothing wrong with that. So kind of went to it a little bit late. So that's why usually we do it earlier in the pod. So our apologies on that one. But lots to discuss. We'll get more to a little bit more in depth maybe on Monday's pod on some of the trade targets for we'll look at fits, Frank. We'll play matchmaker on Monday's pod for some of these trade. Also, wishing all the best for Connor Zary. That did not look good in that game, and of course for everybody in the Palisades in Los Angeles, and the fires are ongoing there. Obviously, the game was postponed last night. Now the Kings are on the road, so hopefully when they return home, things will be calmed down. Frankie, have a good weekend. That's the rundown brought to you by Bet365. Use a promo code NATION to get in on all sorts of events.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.